Just kidding. Nick Jr.
Nick Jr. Nick Jr. Nick Jr.
Illuminating television.
In the beginning, there was Pinwheel. Pinwheel was the first. You know, I could do that, or you could just watch this video here. But in an effort to save time, let's start here. During the Nick Jr. rise, Nick Jr. would be conceived on April 1st of 1979. This was the start of Nickelodeon dividing itself for general audiences and niches. Nick shows airing at that time were only Pinwheel and Today's Special that aired Wednesdays and weekends from 8 AM to 2 PM. Fast forward, Nick would rebrand this block as Nick Jr. with the JUNIOR. Go figure, right? On January 4th of 1988, at the same time it would air the Spanish version of The World of David Known. Nick Jr. would air Pinwheel for 3 hours a day on the block until his final broadcast on June 29th of 1990, while at the same time dividing slots to launch its first original show, Eureka's Castle. Additional shows airing were imported from Britain and Canada and other countries such as Maya and the Bee, Dr. Snuggles, Belle and Sebastian, and Sharon, Lois, and Bram's Elephant Show. By 1993, Nick Jr. would get 2 new additions, Capelli and Company, as well as a new logo. The new logo was orange and blue, with the Nickelodeon logo being an orange form of an adult caretaker, while the Junior would be shortened in blue, as well as representing a kid-like form of what the adult is. It would also be a new slogan for the Nick Jr. Grow, Play, Learn would be a slogan to represent the shows that were aired, giving parents a chance to join in the shows with their kids. The Grow, Play, Learn slogan were short London Bridge jingles, while kids played around the Nick Jr. logo. The interstitials with Capelli and Company with Frank Capelli. More interstitials would come from the Jim Henson Company, such as Muppet Time, as the Jim Henson Company itself would take on Nickelodeon stock during the 80s and 90s. These shorts were 2 minutes each of 40 shorts aired on Nick Jr. to not cut into ad time that were mainly self-imposed. Fast forward to April 4th of 1994, Muppet Hour would take the block with The Muppet Show and Muppet Babies, and you would think because of these investments that the block would do well, right?
Wrong!
Nick Jr., just like its sister channel in the Green Vegetable era, was just as bad, if not worse, in show ratings. Kids were not engaged in comparison to channels like PBS and TLC's Ready, Set, Learn children's block. This would cause Viacom to make more drastic changes as the next investor, as Warner Corp and Amex would drop Nickelodeon entirely.
Jr is just for me.
For who?
Just for me.
Nick Jr. would do something most TV blocks wouldn't do, take a break for a few months as Viacom's takeover was beginning to take hold. As this happened, Geraldine Laybourne would become president and would revolutionize the entire brand. Nick Jr. would come back on October 24th of 1994. Nick Jr. would have 2 in-house programs from Jumbo Pictures Inc. and Perez Brown Productions. Allegra's Window would be the first, while the most iconic show would put Nick Jr. on the map.
Let's all go to Gullah Gullah Island. Gullah Gullah Island. Gullah Gullah Island.
Allegra's Window was a show that used puppets and live action, while Gullah Gullah Island was a barrier breaker for not only live action and puppetry, but cultural barriers as well. Show creator Ron Diaz, born in St. Helena Island, South Carolina, and his wife Natalie Diaz, a New York native, would perform their show based on Ron's book, Author of Renaissance and Sea Island Heritage. While performing Sea Island montage, Nickelodeon execs were watching the show. One Nickelodeon producer, Maria Perez Brown, also responsible for the short-lived TV show Taina, would be taken by elements of multiculturalism and vivid details of a traditional family that would make this show come together. During the 90s, Nickelodeon put a huge emphasis on not only making timeless characters, but cultural diversity. This was groundbreaking on many levels. Gullah Gullah Island was the first kid show of its kind to have an atomic black family unit and an indigenous black community. Shows such as The Jeffersons, The Cosby Show, and The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air were different in comparison, as the show was created with the black family intact, socializing and remaining in a community city with its own culture aside from the moving on up, living in the best side of Brooklyn, or moving with your auntie and uncle in Bel Air type of plot. The name of the show Ron had various conniptions for, as he did not want to make fun of the Gullah culture. Like Allegra's Window, Gullah Gullah Island was taped and recorded at Nickelodeon Studios at Universal Studios in Orlando, Florida, and certain scenes were actually aired in South Carolina itself. At this time, many of the sets were heavily recycled. Both Allegra's Window and Gullah Gullah Island used the exterior set of Clarissa Explains It All. The set's interior was slightly different, but it was heavily recycled. Binya Binya was also a Barney-like anthropomorphic character meant to engage the kids in various songs and dances that the show heavily used. The show was praised for the lessons it taught, like self-care, being an upstanding member of community, family values, and teaching the Gullah language. Gullah Gullah Island was on the top 10 TV Guide's children's programming and would average 750,000 views an episode. While the Chicago Tribune journalist Jennifer Manigan said it stars, quote, perfect parents, Ron and Natalie Diaz, who with their 3 children who never fight, neighbors and friends, seek to entertain and socially educate kids through a sing-song series. While the show encourages active participation from at-home viewers, the dictionary responses and incomparable energy from the Diazes make normal parents look like misfits. Perhaps as the show seasons, the lip-syncing will improve and the characters won't be so picture perfect. Who is this woman? See, this is why we don't take Chicago seriously. After the shows became successes, Nick Jr. would launch a new mascot to the channel, Face, voiced by Chris Phillips, while the Nick Jr. voice announcer was female. Face was an interactive mascot to not only announce the show, but to teach kids feelings, colors, letters, and numbers, while also having his iconic trumpet. This would get a 50% uptick in viewership, as 1995 was looking bright for Nick Jr. As this was happening, the block would garner the IPs of Rupert, The Busy World of Richard Scarry, and the Nelvana book-to-animation Little Bear. While in 1996, this show would take Nick Jr. to the next level. During the 90s, PBS was the only educational channel kids could watch, and parents would argue that other cartoon blocks wouldn't show much educational programs. Even at the time, PBS Kids' Ready to Learn grant wasn't enough. By 1990, Congress would enact the Children's Television Act, making sure that channels were made to follow guidelines and make educational shows. Failure to do so would mean losing their channel license. While the 2 in-house studio productions would garner numbers, Nick Jr. would take a chance on another hit show. The trio of Angela C. Santomero, Todd Kessler, and Tracy Page Johnson will be picked up by Nick as freelancers and researchers who used to work for Sesame Street. Todd Kessler, former freelancer for Nick, called Sesame Street, quote, static and lacking in visuals. This would lead Todd to get in touch with researcher David R. Richardson, who was the advisor and former researcher of the University of Massachusetts of Amherst. As research began, the team would come to the conclusion that kids were lacking in content that not only made them engage, but use critical thinking skills to solve problems and tasks. This would make them collab on the show Blue's Clues, while Nickelodeon would be interested in making programs that not only entertained a group of kids, but also taught them skills. The pilot script would be pitched at Viacom headquarters in New York. How Blue's Clues was pitched was using the same research as Sesame Street, while at the same time addressing how more channels were setting educational and informational standards. Todd addressed how Sesame Street was dull to kids. Blue's Clues in practice would help kids with critical thinking skills, while in addition empowering them, hence the famous catchphrase.
And we can do anything that we wanna do.
Blue's Clues originally would be called Blue's Prince. Blue the dog would also be a cat and male, but was scrapped as Nickelodeon had already made a show with a cat. I wonder which one. The title was changed as Green Light Test came back, with children universally calling it Blue's Clues. The show needed a host, and as they were holding auditions, out of 1,500 actors, the children chose Steve Burns. Producers for the show thought Steve was a good fit as he loved the show but didn't want to make a career of it. As the concept and host was chosen, $150,000 was given to make the show. The original pilot was released in '94. However, the release of the show was September 8th of 1996 on Nick at Night primetime, and then the next day on Nick Jr. The show would explode in '97 as viewership would be 13.7 million per viewer and airing in 60 countries. Blue's Clues would also become the third biggest show on children's programming, second to Arthur and Barney. In the later years, Blue's Clues would change host. As Steve would put it, he did not want to be old and running the kids show for the rest of his life. That, and he was losing his hair pretty fast. Therefore, when he was growing older, he would leave it to somebody else, making the next host Donovan Patton or Joe. Let's leave a bookmark here.
Hello. My name is Max, and this is my friend the letter M. Hello, M.
Hello, Max.
Blue's Clues would help blow up Nick Jr. so much that Gullah Gullah Island would be dethroned as the #1 children's television show and eventually forgotten. By '97, Blue's Clues would garner the second slot on Nick Jr. or additional showings, while Papa Beaver's Storytime and the Webulous World of Dr. Seuss would air as well. Fast forward to '98, NickJr.com would be launched, while at the same time would rebrand itself as Just for Me. By '99, Nick Jr. ratings would go higher as book-to-animation shows such as Franklin, Kipper, and Maisie were aired on January and February. Fast forward to November, Nick Jr. would create the third successful show.
Lunchtime is our favorite time to munch.
Time to munch
I'm the tastiest banana in the bunch.
in the bunch.
Hello, friend.
Little Bill, produced by Bill Cosby and co-produced by Backyardigans creator Janice Burgess, was inspired by Bill's upbringing in Philadelphia, as Little Bill's catchphrase, "Hello, friend," was inspired by Enos Cosby. Little Bill was lauded for helping kids use their imagination and problem-solving skills. Now, you may be wondering what happened to this show. Keep a bookmark on that one. Shining Time Station was briefly aired to promote the movie Thomas and the Magic Station, while at the same time Maggie and the Ferocious Beast would air. While this promo was a limited time only, this show would take over the whole Nick Jr. lineup. Nickelodeon was looking for another hit show, and Blue's Clues put them on the map. Executives thought that making a show that made kids think that they were little explorers was the next big thing. Combining their hit shows Blue's Clues and Little Bear was what they were going for. Nickelodeon was also going for a show that had Latino representation, as most shows on Nick did not have Hispanic characters. Dora was the first pan-Latina character on children's television. The show was also aiming to strike out Swiper the Fox, as he was unsettling to kids that viewed it. However, the producer was more inclined to have an antagonist like Swiper. The voice of Dora was none other than Peruvian-American actress Kathleen Hurley's. Born in Queens, New York, Kathleen voiced Dora for 4 years and 5 seasons before being replaced by Caitlin Sanchez. Dora the Explorer would air on August 13th of 2000 and outrank Blue's Clues in time slots and viewers. Fast forward to 2001, Nick Jr. would then acquire the IP for the US dub of Bob the Builder, and months later would make their next original show, Oswald, in August. That show would not last 1 season before cancellation. Because Blue's Clues and Dora the Explorer were the 2 biggest shows on Nick Jr., they would have their own block called Nick Jr.'s Play Along Time in 2003, while most of the old Nick Jr. shows would be casted off to Noggin and air as reruns, as Nick Jr. was making more room in episodes regarding Blue and Dora. Noggin shorts such as Ooby and Miffy and Friends were aired once a commercial break to promote Noggin as a preschool block during the transition to Moose Moose and Z. While this was going on, Face as a mascot would be discontinued, as Face served as the mascot for 9 years. The last Face showing was August 29th of 2003. Nick Jr. would cool down during this time, mainly because this was the time Nickelodeon was becoming more corporate and only focused on shows that were making the money and views. During this time, Nick Jr. would only acquire the rights to Rubber Dubbers. Nick would also gain a new short to its block called Play Along, starring Robin, played by Hilary Hawkins, and Zach, played by Travis Guba, while there were 2 foot puppets called the Feet Beats, while Face was brought back and voiced by Bobby Floyd, who was the announcer for Nick on CBS. By 2004, Face would only last 1 year and end on October 8th of 2004.
I love to hop like a kangaroo. I love Nick Jr. and airplane. Awesome.
Nick Jr. would be ramping up production again on new shows, while at the same time commissioning Little Airplane Productions to co-create new shows and interstitials after the huge success of Ubi on Noggin. Nick Jr. would gain a new mascot, Piper Opossum, voiced by pop artist Ali Brutovsky, and co-produced by Little Airplane. Blue's Clues during season 6 would introduce new characters Paprika, Harry Winkle, while at the same time introduce the 2-season puppet show Blues Room. Miss Spider Sunny Patch Friends would also air on the block, while 2 new shows would become instant classics.
And we're your backyard friends, the backyard again.
The Backyardigans started off as a puppet show called Me and My Friends in the 90s by Janice Burgess. The pilot script was rejected by Nick, while at the same time picked up by Nick Digital, who would then co-produce the show with Canadian studio Nelvana. The show was a parody version of many different movies and action shows in the form of a backyard adventure. Janice thought that cartoons at the time were pretty violent, so instead of showing kids more violence, why not make certain adventures song and dance? The show would run for 4 seasons and 80 episodes, while in the later years, Janice would retire from the show for the Winx Club revival. The show itself would go viral with songs on TikTok with Castaways and Into the Thick of It, while also topping Spotify charts in 2020. Lazytown was a show by Icelandic aerobic champion Magnus Shiving. Originally, the show in the Icelandic language translates to Afrim Latabir, or Go Go Lazytown. Those stage plays were interactive and encouraged kids to be active and make healthy choices. The book and stage play go back to 1996. In 97, puppets in the show were humans. However, Robbie Rotten was not a character yet. By the 3rd book, Lazytown in Trouble, Robbie was a character. After many tours in Iceland, Nick Australia would pick up the show and adapt it to TV as Lazytown was a household name. By the 2000s, Nickelodeon would pitch the show and would change the side characters from humans to puppets. As the budget was around $1 million, the largest budget for a pilot script, it would garner 1 million views in a consecutive TV week, topping Dora the Explorer during its first launch. The show was heavily praised by critics for teaching kids healthy lifestyle choices during the rise of the childhood obesity epidemic. Later on would go parodying characters in Moral Oral and become an internet meme, while also getting songs remixed by rapper Lil Jon. Wow Wow Wubbzy and Dora the Explorer spinoff Go Diego Go would also be airing at the same time, while Nick Jr. would also get their cult classic shows from Little Airplane. After the huge success of Ubi, Little Airplane Productions would put out shorts called Lenny the Guinea Pig. This would be the pilot script to Wonder Pets. Ubi, after its 2nd season, would have Lenny's shorts, and Nickelodeon would pick it up as a TV series. This show was created with photo puppetry and Adobe After Effects. Jennifer Oxley would add Ming Ming and Tucker, her pet red ear slider. The show would also add 10-minute musicals and operetta to help kids understand classical music and get them into it, while also teaching them teamwork and solving issues with a team. By 2007, Yo Gabba Gabba was the only show launched from Nick Jr. created by Christian Jacobs and Scott Schultz. The two would gain inspiration from various shows and then be picked up by Napoleon Dynamite director Jarrett Hess. The show launched on August 20th. A month later, the Piper Opossum bumpers would end September 7th.
We are delighted to say Noggin is now Nick Jr. Hooray! Take a bow, Z!
In 2008, Ni Hao Kai Lan would be the next show on Nick Jr. However, that would be the only show to launch on the block. The show was the first to have a Chinese represented character, second to a Hispanic represented character like Dora. The show wouldn't do so well as it only lasted 3 seasons. Nick Jr. would eventually lose momentum as most shows were ending, and many shows would be tossed over to Noggin. However, Nick Jr. would take over Noggin in 2009. Nick Jr. would also rebrand to Nick Jr.'s Playdate. This would mark the first in Nick Jr.'s history to not have a mascot at all, while at the same time get rid of Nick Jr.'s name and go back to Nickelodeon by 2010. Team Umizoomi would be the only Nick Playdate show to be released. By 2011, Nick's Playdate would get more bumpers and airtime as Nickelodeon would be played more in the late afternoon, while at the same time gain a new show, Bubble Guppies. While in 2012, the Nick Jr. channel would get an addition to its block called Nick Mom. It was Nickelodeon, but for moms. There are these two channels, so I don't know. It was mainly a parody channel online, albeit it took into a block only airing shows for the housewife demographic, while at the same time adding Nick Jr. shows to the mix. This block would not last long. The Nick Jr. playdate would go on until 2014, while at the same time get a new addition to the block, Blaze and the Monster Machines. Little Bill in 2014 will be scrapped off Noggin and Nickelodeon blocks entirely as the Bill Cosby allegations came to light, while later the American Library Association would ban all Little Bill books from the shelves of every library in America. Amazon Prime still hosts the show's episodes, however. Gotta call that some form of luck. By 2013, Nick Jr. the brand would come back, while at the same time air the biggest hit show to date. Paw Patrol was first a toy prototype of a transforming truck in 2010 by Ronan Harry. Spin Master then wanted to do a television show on transforming cars. Enter Keith Chapman, creator of Bob the Builder. The mock pilots were called Raffi and the Rescue Dogs. The show itself would focus more on Ryder, or then named Raffi, rescuing the dogs and making the team. This would be abandoned in 2012 by Scott Kraft. Spin Master would then go to other major networks and get the show launched, and Nickelodeon would announce it during their licensing expo in Las Vegas, Nevada. The theme song would be sung by Scott Simmons, while the animation would be done by Guru Studios. After the release, 160 countries would air Paw Patrol, garnering 5 million views over Blue's Clues and Dora the Explorer, while also garnering a cultural following with Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and comedian Jimmy Fallon. The merchandise would garner over $1 billion. Paw Patrol would also get 2 feature-length films from Nickelodeon Studio, as well as a spin-off show with Rubble. This show also put Paw Patrol in hot water with both gender discrimination, as Skye was the only female dog, creating a hashtag on social media, as well as the George Floyd riots with the dog Chase being a good cop and the rhetoric with police at the time. The show still to this day holds an audience of children since its release. At the same time, Blue's Clues and You would launch in 2019 and be the next hit show with Nick Jr. And that's all she wrote for now. Is there an actual downfall to Nick Jr.? It's complicated. At one hand, you can argue that the current shows do not cater to a demographic, and you can make an argument on that. Times change, and the demographic of millennial Gen Zs have outgrown Nick Jr., or at the very least should have. Some may argue that there are too many reboots of classic titles, and you can be right about that too. Albeit this is the same demographics that still want classic shows to be rebooted, and you can argue that most animation companies go for if it ain't broke, reboot it route, because investing in new shows are a great financial risk. On the other hand, some can say Nick Jr. is still going strong, being the only channel to actually keep Nickelodeon alive, as Nick Jr. went the Adult Swim route of taking more of a huge chunk of airtime while the major sister blocks figure out their next line of attack. You can say Noggin has shut down, so Nick Jr. will always be bad, but you see most of their Nick Jr. shows on Paramount Plus. Notice how I said most, okay? Notice how I said that, because Little Bill is on Amazon Prime. Okay, I just want that to be well known. However you may feel about this channel, you can't deny that your little one, niece or nephew will bother you about the latest Paw Patrol episode, while at the same time, the grown adults show their kids the shows that they grew up with. Cause this show, this thing on YouTube, ain't it, okay? It's not. Considering Nickelodeon's downfall, Nick Jr. seems to be keeping its sister block afloat. The question is, well, for how much longer?
Epilogue.
Well, that was an ordeal, getting through that whole history, and I hope I don't have to do another preschool video on this channel ever again. You've got to be kidding me.